for another edition, Thursday edition of That Advice. So, welcome back. If you haven't been here before, welcome. And I will get started. I think I'm trying to change things up a little bit and kind of make the process a little bit different. So, I'm just going to start out just to get straight into content in case somebody is watching this the next day. That's kind of going to be my goal here, and just go straight into some content, and then we'll go from there. And these are some questions that were asked towards the end of the last session that I didn't get to. I'll start with these, maybe do an introduction once there are a couple actual people watching on Reddit, and then get today's questions. So, the question, okay, so Long Disaster asked, I have a hard, aggressive dad. Through him, I became very depressed and had many suicidal thoughts. Any advice? My parents won't let me move away because I have to take care of the house. So, look, just straight up, the first thing anytime somebody mentions suicidal thoughts, I hope that you're getting help with that before they're real thoughts in your mind. So, you should be seeing a therapist if you're having suicidal thoughts. That's the long and the short of that. So please do yourself a favor, do us all a favor, because I'm sure your friends appreciate having you in the world, and if not, I appreciate having you in the world. So please find a therapist that you're comfortable talking with and talk through what's creating those suicidal thoughts and find some help for yourself. So, I guess I can talk a little bit about a couple things that you're kind of bringing up here. And it sounds like you don't have a lot of hope based on kind of what you put out there. And the first thing I'll encourage you to understand is that sometimes we find ourselves stuck in a place in life where there doesn't seem to be all that much hope. But what you'll find is that can change in an instant. So a lot of what kind of I talk about here and kind of what I've come to realize is that the less we can be micro-focused in exactly where we are right now, but rather be more macro-focused in our entire life, in the opportunities of our entire life, which is many years, another 50 years, hopefully for me. So, and I don't know how many for you, 60, 70 years, right? So don't look at where you are right now, but rather understand that where you are now is not where you're going to be in 1 year, in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20 years. Just take a moment if you're in your 20s and count to 70. It takes you a little bit of time to do that. And each of those is a year. So it brings out this aspect where I think we can take a step back, and instead of being so hyper-focused on where we are right now, we can broaden that perspective, and that can give us a little bit more peace. So that's the first thing I just kind of throw out there is, that I found very helpful. Because sometimes, in life, you can get to a place where it's just like you're stuck, right? And there's not a lot of hope. But opening up that door and realizing that that life is long, and just like I wasn't always in a place before which was hopeless, I'll once again at some point be in a place that's, hopeful, or, the issues have been taken care of. So just something to throw out there. I think that can help a little bit, when we're kind of in a depressed mode, because I think it's that lack of hope that sometimes pushes us down, because we're like, what's our exit? And even here where you said your parents won't let you move out because I have to take care of the house. Well, hopefully there's some work you can do around that, right? To realize that that's not your burden, right? And again, I don't know how old you are, but part of life is figuring out where our boundaries are and being strong in ourselves and making ourselves strong. So that might be your personal work a little bit, is make yourself a little bit stronger so you feel comfortable standing up to your parents and saying, hey guys, you know what? This really isn't what I'm looking for. And then you move out and you do what you're looking for. Because that's the other part where I think I found some depression in my own life, is when I don't have the control to be myself, right? So I think that's a very depressing place to be, because we're not free. And that lack of freedom is hard. So so that's kind of the first thing I would throw out there, is kind of that recognition of finding some freedom for yourself and finding, allowing yourself to be you. That's the most important thing. You only get one chance to be you. There's a reason why I think we get depressed when we're not being ourselves, right? Because our body's telling us this isn't healthy, and then that pain can create change, and we can have the opportunity to find ourselves and find freedom. So, but I do hope that works out well for you, obviously. So is this advice for dads or from dads? I'm just a dude on the internet. I am a dad. I have a 15-year-old, a 19-year-old, and a 20-year-old. 45. I've lived through an interesting life so far, and I've learned a lot along the way. And I'm just here to share what I've learned regarding fatherhood, regarding maybe person that want information of what 20 to 45 might make their life a little bit easier in the path, and just share what I've learned. And that's kind of what I'm here for. So, and it was my profession. I'm actually kind of an entrepreneur. I've done a couple different things, but I'm not a professional. So none of this should be construed as professional advice, rather the advice of somebody who's thought about things along the way, and you'll know for yourself if it's reflective for you or not, right? Because that's part of it is what I'm saying help you, and if it does, then great, and if not, then there's no harm, no foul. Okay, so I had two questions here. How do I stop being lazy? How to be self-disciplined? Those came right after the other yesterday, and that's interesting because I think those are somewhat connected. So let's talk about being lazy a little bit. I do think that, first of all, for some people, who are on the opposite side, I think it's perfectly fine to be lazy. I don't think there's anything wrong with whatever we choose to be. The only problem with some of these things is when it's not working for us, sometimes we need to create some change, right? So there's really nothing wrong with being lazy unless you can't pay your bills, right? So, or unless there is some other negative outcome from your laziness. But there's absolutely nothing wrong in and of itself for being lazy. And I think for some people, like myself, it's not so easy to be lazy. So I have to give myself permission to be lazy, which is just another example where whatever we feel, however we're feeling in life, is real, and we have to accept it for ourselves. So but what are some steps to stop being lazy that I've learned? So I would say one thing is really knowing what you're trying to accomplish, right? Tangibly, do you know the value of not being lazy? So it can't just be this abstract reward, but it has to be a tangible reward and something that you can actually achieve. So I think that's the first thing I throw out there is can you figure out, and again, I don't know what you're lazy about, but can you take a step back and figure out what it is that would motivate you and that you could step up and create success with? And that's also, I say, small successes. It's always important not to make this, the larger the thing you're chasing, the harder it is to make it tangible. So it has to be something where it's like, I want to clean my room because, let's say, the mess is kind of messing with my head. And so what I at that point, what I can do is I can say, okay, well, I'm going to clean up this part of the room today and then get some satisfaction from it. And then this part the next day. So break it up into pieces is kind of the advice there around that. And but it takes self-discipline, right? And so, when it comes to self-discipline, I think some of us are more naturally self-disciplined than others. So I don't think it's a one-size-fits-all thing, like anything in life, any personality trait. And so, but for me personally, there's a couple of rules I've applied, which I found helpful. One, my cousin taught me, my cousin Adam, and he taught me, it's called the one-touch rule. And I'm not sure if he taught me this or not, but I think he taught me this. And the idea is that if something needs to get done, you do it. And so if I pass something that's going to need to get picked up later, I pick it up now. And then every time I pass it, I don't have to think, oh, I need to pick this up, right? Which takes a lot of mental energy to do that constantly. Rather, I do it, and then it's done, and then I can go relax. And that's something that's worked well for me. but I think the self-discipline in laziness, it's all the same thing, right? Self-discipline creates the opportunity not to be lazy. So I think those go hand in hand. So let me do this. I'm going to go ahead and pull up today's videos. Since a couple of you here, I'm going to put my phone number out there. I'm going to put a couple links in there as well. If you haven't been here before, I'm typically here 5 o'clock Eastern Standard Time on Reddit. And so I'm going to go ahead and put that all in the stream here, along with my phone number. Let me pull that up. And that way, I'm always like, did I copy and paste the right stuff in? Like, the last thing I want to do is like copy and paste the wrong thing. It's kind of embarrassing. So there we go. So what we got here, we got, like I said, I'm here typically most days at 5. I created a VDAD subreddit where I'm kind of posting if I'm not going to show up, for those of you that care, because I try to be here every day, like I said. I've also put up my YouTube channel, and I need 28 more people, and then I'll stop bothering people, but I just need subscribers so I can name the channel and people can find it. And then most importantly is my phone number, and I encourage you to call me and have a conversation. I've done that a number of times at this point, and people have found it to be, I think, interesting to listen to, and that number is 470-575-0111, and the lines are open. So, okay, so that's that. Let's go back to the Agritrol and Soy Rishi advice for your younger self. Yeah, and I've kind of talked to that a bit over time. I'm trying to say what's the advice I'd give you, right? Because I think it's different than the advice that I would give myself, right? I think that's the important thing to realize, is that we're all on a path, each of us, and we're each on a different path. And I think what you'll find is if you can figure out where you are on your path, you can know what kind of you need to get advice on. And you follow that, and you keep following that path where it leads you. And that, to me, has been the path to freedom. So I'd kind of throw that out there. And I'm sorry, I kind of glanced over that just because I've talked about that a bit in the last couple of weeks. How does small talk? I like that. I hate small talk. I hate small talk. I'm also somewhat of an introvert. I don't really like, I mean, I'm an extrovert. I can sail. I'm a sales guy, so I can get on the phone and talk to people. But put me in a social environment, and it's a whole new game, right? It's a whole different, social anxiety aspect. It's a whole different game. So how to small talk? So, and again, it probably depends on the environment, right? Are you small talking with someone you're meeting that you're interested in, right? For relationship kind of purposes, right? Or is it the business environment? The nice thing that someone once told me is that, if it wasn't for the weather, we'd have nothing to talk about. That's so true, right? So really what small talk is, and what his point was, is that it's about finding commonality. And weather is the ultimate common denominator between you and the person that you're talking with, right? They're in the same weather pattern as you are. So, and also it's apolitical and other things as well. But the point being that the idea for small talk is, can we find something that you have in common with the person that you're standing across from and you're just meeting? So, I would say that typically if you can point out something that they're wearing, right? There's something unique that the person's wearing that you can say, hey, that's really cool. Where'd you get it? So you can either ask questions. I think that's in generally, the best approach is asking questions and kind of soliciting some information that you can then talk to. Or you can just share your information about yourself, which can sometimes be just a little easier because you know yourself. So just sharing a story. Oh, it's a funny thing. And not getting too far into your head. I think that's going to be kind of the key, is that we sometimes get in our head in a way that precludes us from being able to have a flow in conversation. And yeah, so I guess that's kind of where I would take it. So I don't know if that's helpful, but some ideas about small talk. Okay. Let's talk about, just for a minute, since there are a couple of you here, what I typically talk about at the very beginning of this, which is what I kind of post here, that you're beautiful. Because I think it's great that every day, anybody who's interested can come here, myself included, and feel beautiful for a minute. Because I think all too often we're walking through life and we're not appreciating ourselves for who we are. Kind of what society does to us. It's kind of human nature. And so let me explain how I find beauty in the world, and find beauty in you, find beauty in myself, and it might be something that can help you find beauty in yourself as well. And it's pretty simple. It's called the whole person. And the idea is that you view yourself as a whole person. So I think you can know from your own experience that there's probably been times when you look at one or two of your negative attributes and you focus, like we were talking about earlier, just hyper focus on those one or two things. And you say, this is who I am. But the reality is that you're so hyper focused on the one or two negatives is that you're ignoring the 20, 30, 40, 50 positive attributes of yourself. So it's not very true to look at yourself as that one or two negative aspects of yourself, is it? Right? The truth is that you're a whole person. You're a person with many, many positive things and a couple of negative things, right? So that's what I mean when I say I want you to look at yourself and view yourself as a whole person. So can you step back? Can you do that, right? And next time you're thinking a negative thought about yourself, is that something that you can maybe move back a little bit and change a little bit? So, because for me at least, that is kind of the power. Sorry, I just got just noticed something over there. So anyway, so that's the idea. Now, once you can view yourself as a whole person, then what I think you're going to find is that you can see yourself as beautiful because you're seeing that entire person. And the fact is that you can look at somebody else, and instead of maybe looking at their one or two negative traits, do it with someone else, and then maybe you can bring it back to yourself. Instead of looking at their one or two negative traits, look at them as a person, and you'll see that they're beautiful, and their flaws, they're still beautiful, right? Just like, because the problem is that if you're focused on the flaws, then someone's not beautiful, right? So you could look at, and take your dog, for example, if you have a dog, right? So there's a couple things about them. They crap like on the grass. Like there are things that you could point to and say, that's pretty gross. But the reality is you look at them as a whole and they don't really bother you. So start doing that with people and you'll start feeling happy around people probably. And then you bring that into yourself and you can start feeling your own inner beauty. And this recognition that we're all different, and that in and of itself is a beautiful thing. And then once you get there, and the hope is that can inspire you and give you some freedom to do anything you want in the world, because the only thing that's limiting you is your mind. So that's what I mean when I put that up there. And let's go back to the questions. Can you advise how I can get out of Christmas with my in-laws so that I can spend a few days watching horror films and eating burgers? Mutter from another brother. Got it. Yeah, so I don't know that, I don't see why those are mutually exclusive. I'm not sure I understand the question, but feel free to maybe clarify a little bit more and I'll talk a little more about it. How are you guys doing today? Are you guys happy today? Are you satisfied with where your life is today? Are you on a path towards happiness that's satisfying to you? I hope so. Okay. So we asked, how do you know if you're getting closer to true expression of self and deal with feelings of nihilism? I think that's a fair question. I don't know that you ever know if you're closer to true expression of self, other than it kind of goes back to that thing I was talking about. Like, I think we always think we're expressing ourselves truly. Um, but there are these things in our mind that we can create awareness around and then resolve. So we have all these problems in our mind, is what I've experienced. And each problem has to be looked at. And my problems are going to be different than your problems because they come from your environment, they come from your upbringing. So to some extent, the weird thing is that I think at all points in my life, if you'd asked me, am I truly expressing myself? I would say, yes, I'm truly expressing myself. But the reality is as I look back on my past self, I can clearly see that I wasn't truly expressing myself. So just like now, I would say I'm truly expressing myself. I fully expect in 5 years, I'll look back and say, well, you know what, Josh, you hadn't yet realized that you needed to work on this or that and release them so you could even have a better true expression of yourself. I do think there are certain aspects that I had when I was younger that if I was understood it better, would have clearly showed me that I wasn't being truly expressive of myself. One of those things was I've never had like a large amount of depression, but there was definitely an aspect of like an over, like it was like a darkness is the best way I can put it. So it wasn't like I was in bed, I was doing stuff, I was accomplishing things, but there was this little aspect of self where I felt a little bit trapped and a little bit depressed. So I think to me that was kind of a clue at that time that clearly I wasn't truly expressing myself. I think in dreams, there are certain dreams I have, and for me, I've had to have some weird dreams. I know that kind of now I can recognize it, and you can ask yourself if you have some dreams like this, where they are showing me that I'm not expressing myself. And for me, one of them is that like my tongue just kind of keeps coming out, and like or I can't open my mouth because there's too much tongue. And that to me, anytime I have that dream, I now know that there's some aspect of myself that I'm not being able to express. But again, like a lot of this stuff is that until you create awareness around it, you can't know that that's what it is. For 20 years, I would have that dream and not realize what that was. And so now it's pretty simple. I have that dream. I ask myself, what am I not being expressive about? And I express it and that dream stops. So there are certain clues that we can use in our body, like I said, depression, maybe dreams, that can clue us in to where we are in terms of our own self-expression. And I'm gonna have to come back to you on, and it's just because part of who I am is I have to come back to what feelings of nihilism would be. I don't know if that's like existential angst or something like that, but I'll have to go back. I'm not like I'm not a studied philosopher, so I'll have to go back and see what that is, and maybe I can talk to some of that once I know what it is a little bit better. And then I think the true expression of self, I think you can feel it in a certain reaction. And what I mean by that is some aspect of bliss. There's a certain, when you're truly expressing yourself, you get into this space, which is, it's just light. It feels light, it feels blissful, which is kind of the opposite of depression, right? If you think about it, I never thought about it, but that's kind of true. So I think that's how I kind of know when I'm, entering into kind of some of that space and I'm not feeling restricted, that I'm getting into that truer expression. But like I said, that's what I've learned so far. So we'll see in 5 years, I'll probably look back and say, you still weren't doing it. And then the other thing that I think you do is you have to work at becoming self-expressive. It's not a simple thing, right? Because what I find is that a lot of the time is that your self-expression flies in the face of other people's needs. So there's some aspect where either society, your parents, um, wherever you are. There's some social aspect which says this is how you need to be, this is how you need to act. And that flies in the face of your own freedom, of your own self-expression. So learning how to better self-express in those environments, which you can do through teaching yourself how to not care so much about what people think, how to tactfully approach certain people in certain environments. And these are just like social skills, but where you've created your boundaries, right? And so the more I think about it, the more this stuff comes in, right? So have you created boundaries, right? That's the first question, right? So can you say, this is where I end and this is where you begin? And then can you hold your boundaries and say, I'm not going to allow this in my life. I'm not going to allow you to do this in my space. And then the question is, can you do that gracefully, right? So I think we all kind of learn maybe how to do that, but at first we might be a little bit more aggressive, but eventually we learn how to do it gracefully. And that allows for a more truthful expression. So I love the question. Thank you for asking that. I've never really given that a lot of thought, but I think there's actually a lot of good stuff in there. Frogadelic, I see this audio sounds soft. I will listen afterwards and see what's going on there. Maybe not sure what the deal is. Odd. Oh, also, let me just throw back out, since there are some new people here. There's always kind of some new people. If anybody wants to call and chat, we can have a little conversation. The number here, 470-575-0111. And I can't see the chat, but if somebody can paste it there for anybody that does want to call, actually, I'm just going to throw that in right now, and we can talk through something. Which I like that. I don't like it just me talking for 45 minutes. It gets a little long sometimes. So there's my number. Call. Say hello. Call your dad. And actually, Frogadelic, I like that idea for Rishi too. Absolutely. I think like anything, just talking to random people will improve your small talk. So instead of just focusing on those environments where you end up having to have small talk, a better approach really might be to, go to Starbucks and just have small talk with random people. I mean, that was an exercise I did once upon a time. That was really scary, like just walking up to people and having random conversations. But the more you do it, and the more you see that they don't bite your head off, or they don't call the police, or they don't, whatever, you start to realize it's somewhat safe, and you start to realize that people actually might even enjoy it. And so then there's like a mind shift that you can do. So that exercise of really just going and talking to random people, I love that, actually. I think that's a great approach. And then you can bring that back to whatever environment you're in, and it's going to be a lot less scary because you're so experienced. I mean, another good example is just public speaking. I was so scared of public speaking in college. Like I was like, I'd have these, what do you call it? I'd have these like presentations, and it was like horrible. I mean, I do it because I had to do it, but it was horrible. And then there was a time when I was kind of in a leadership role, and I'd have to get up on stage and speak. And what happened was I started speaking, kind of 3 or 4 times over the course of a couple months. And it kind of got to the point where I got comfortable with it. So that's the same approach, right? Just doing things a bunch make you more comfortable with them. So finding opportunities for that will probably help you be a little more comfortable. Okay. How do I get over something negative in my life when the thing doesn't affect me and I just want to forget it? So in general, I would say that you can't say the thing doesn't affect me in the same sentence of how do I get over something. So it's like what's going on is that there's still something that's affecting you. So what you have to figure out is, what is it that's affecting you? And then once you figure that out, you create awareness around it, it's going to go away. That's how it kind of works, right? So it's the same thing like, after you have a breakup, right? And that person's still like ruminating in your mind. So, because perhaps they hurt you or did something wrong. And so you need to forgive them. So the only way to get them out of your mind is to work through the forgiveness process. So, and it's kind of the same thing here, is that there's something that's you're attaching to. I can't tell you what that is. In fact, if you want to call, we could try to work it out. This is a great kind of thing that you could work out with me, if it's something that you wanted to. And what you got to do is you got to kind of look at the angle of, well, what could it be that's really affecting me? So, and again, typically it's not going to be the negative thing that happened. Rather, it's going to be some aspect, some like tangential thing. So, and I'm trying to figure out how to abstractly kind of give you guys an example. Let's say it's a person that dumped you, and you think it doesn't affect you anymore. So what's going on here? Someone dumps you. So let's say, what are the things that could be going on in that situation? It could be self-esteem, right? That you feel bad. It could, and so once you build up your self-esteem, it'll go away. It could be, right? So does that make sense? So we're looking for those tangential things that this thing provided, right? Because everything provides something to us. So find out what are those 5 things that provided. You got to go through each one, and then you'll probably figure out what it was, and you can move on from it. Does that make sense? Yeah, and that's what Jonah David suggested as well. Okay. So Rishi, I'm an introvert, but I can act as an extrovert. Same here. And the truth is, let's be honest, we're all on a spectrum, right? On all of our personality traits. In fact, it's not even a spectrum. I think it's like a parallel spectrum, right? So there are aspects of self that we can be introverted, and aspects of self that can be extroverted. And depending where we are in, in the day, like there's so many aspects, right, which are going to be dependent on, are we feeling introverted, or are we feeling extroverted? Or other, right, male to female, like just different aspects of spectrum kind of stuff. So anyway, so I'm an introvert, but I can act like an extrovert, which basically means you're both an introvert and an extrovert, right? I think that's actually a more truthful way to look at it. Sometimes I want to spend good time with friends. I don't have anything to talk about. How to find common ground in a conversation. So the first thing is that I just throw out there is, can you be comfortable in silence? In fact, I was thinking there's this woman that I was gonna, ask out on a date, but I thought the best way to ask her out on the date would be, how about we get together and we don't talk and we read together? Can we just be comfortable in each other's presence and enjoy that without even having communication? I never tried it, but I was like, that would be an interesting thing. I was like, she'll just think I'm crazy. But I do believe that it would be a really cool way of getting to know someone, because the truth is that we're all very uncomfortable with silence. You know that if you've ever tried to meditate, it's impossible, right? Our mind doesn't want silence. We know that if we're with somebody, it's hard just to be sitting in silence. In fact, the best way to get someone to talk is to just sit in silence, and then it forces, right, the other person to say something, right? So if you're trying to get a deal done, it's a great trick. Just be quiet and let the other person stumble over the deal. But having said that, if they're your friends, then hopefully, you have shared experiences, and that's where you're going to be able to pull from. But also sometimes just with my friends, I'll be like, I got nothing to talk about, and just pass the ball back to them. And everyone's pretty cool. Is that helpful? What's it like getting older for you? And lightning bolt Neil. I guess there's a bunch of messages underneath, so we'll get there as we go. What's it like getting older? Well, I like it overall. And I'm 45, so I don't know if that's older or not. I would say that overall life is better for me at 45 than it's probably ever been. Um, it's the easiest for me life has ever been. But part of that's also that my kids have kind of grown up because kids are a lot of work. Um, I would say there's an aspect of the self-confidence that if you work on this over the years that you can get really make your life a much nicer place because you're not living as much in your head anymore. There's a lot of learning how to undo all these things that we learn in our childhood and through society over the years. If you do the work, it's just very freeing. So you can live just from a much freer place. So for me, I think I'm just really enjoying the adventure. Um, and I think there's a little existential angst that comes, but I've had that my whole life. But there's more as I'm like, oh, well, you know, I'm halfway to 90, you know. So I think that kind of changes the discussion a little bit. Um, and I think I'm in a little bit more pain, right? It used to be that my body, I think that's one thing, make sure you're exercising and taking care of your body because it's the only body you got. And you can't kind of go back. You just have to keep continuously building, muscle. And I don't mean a huge workout routine, 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day, but stay active with your body and don't let it go. And maybe you'll feel better about yourself and you'll be able to accomplish more. So that's kind of how it's been for me. Okay. Who's your favorite hate preacher? I've never heard of a hate preacher. I don't know what that is. Let's see what else we got here. I'm not sure if I understand it. I have 3 really good friends in my entire life. I've always been at the same school with them, but now the Finland school system forces different places, and I'm really bad at making new friends, even though I want to do better. And I also, so I'm not sure that I hear the question. Okay, let's see what else we got. Okay, my father has trouble explaining his emotions and opening up to his family. Is there anything I can do to help him feel okay with expressing himself instead of having shallow conversations all the time, bottling his anxiety up behind his daughter? Okay, good. I get the question. So there are probably some books you could, give him. I mean, some people aren't capable of more than shallow conversation. That's reality, right? So, but you want a deeper relationship with your father. And I don't know, is it necessarily anxiety that keeps him from deeper conversation? Or is it that he's never learned really how to have deeper conversation? To me, the first question would always be just ask your mom, how can I have better conversations with dad? Ask your uncle, how can I have deeper conversations with dad, or if the grandparents are alive? So get perspective from people who've been in a relationship the whole life. How can you have that deeper, more connected relationship? Because I understand what you're saying. You want something that feels connected. You want something that feels deep and good, as opposed to something more acquaintance. That's how I always differentiate between acquaintances and friends. Friends are people that I can be vulnerable with, that can be vulnerable with me. And maybe that's kind of the issue, is that you want to be vulnerable with him, but you don't feel comfortable because he's not with you. So it's more of an acquaintance than a true friendship. Sometimes, there is this aspect where a parent doesn't want to burden their child with their issues. So some of that could be at play here. So recognizing that, I think will be insightful, just to figure out, is that really what's going on here? Is there some aspect of, that he just doesn't know? And again, I don't know how old you are, but if you're in your 20s, you might be able to say, hey, you know what, Dad, now that I'm an adult, could we just be friends? Like, can we change our relationship to parent-child to we're now friends? And I think that would be a great approach for some of this, and say, well, now that we're friends, So, and the other thing would just be maybe to get some books, and every Christmas for his birthday, choose one or two books that you think will speak to exactly what the issue is. And again, I can't recommend a book just without a little bit more information. But that would kind of be my approach there. So good luck with that. I hope you get what you're looking for. I do. Okay. Thank you, Bushy Cat. You seem like a cool dude. I may be. May not. It's all good. Okay. Let's do some finance for a little bit. I'm buying my first home. Well, there's only 3 minutes left. Okay. I'll do this for the last couple minutes. Advice, home buying tips for the first-time home buyer. And one of my kind of worlds is real estate. So I would say this. For a first home, I think the approach should be that you buy a home in an up-and-coming area. I think when we're younger is the opportunity to buy in the path of progress. That's what a real estate guy once told me, and that's the most important thing, is that you don't necessarily want to buy right in the middle of where everything is, but you want to be right on the outskirts and let it grow over to you. Because you make your money, they say in real estate, when you buy. So if you buy at a good price, then the sale will come together. So that's the first thing I would just kind of advise is focus on neighborhoods in whatever community you're looking at that aren't right in the middle of everything, which has the amenities you might be looking for, but you're just starting out. But rather buy the cheaper house and create equity value in living in it. So basically, no matter what happens, you're kind of ahead of the game. I do think that it's a great time to buy a house. Money's really cheap. You can get a house now for 3%. So if you're going to be somewhere for a while, take advantage. I don't think this is, this is a pretty unique opportunity. It might go on for some time. They say interest rates might be positive, low for a while, but in my experience, what goes down usually goes back up, and vice versa. So, and then beyond that, I would say that, buy a house that'll last, in your mind, will last you 7 years. I think that's kind of a good approach. So if you're planning to have a kid, whatever it might be, wherever you are in life, that you could say, this is going to be a 7-year house. And with the idea that after 7 years, you'll find the next house. And there's so many tax advantages to people that having houses. The government has really made that a tax advantageous thing, that it takes solid financial sense, I believe, to buy a home when you can. So I see we're almost out of time, but I appreciate you showing up, and just if it's helpful, please just say thank you in the chat, and I'll always appreciate that. And I am here usually 5 Eastern, and I think I put my put the subscription on YouTube. I do need another about 30 people to subscribe, and then I can name the channel and people can find me that way, or on eDad. This is my sub that I'll also post there if you want to watch at your own leisure. So thank you all for joining again, and I look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow 9 to 5. And until then, take a moment, remember how beautiful you are, see yourself as beautiful, and go change the world in whatever image you want it to be. Be well.